and that was seeing and identifying any living wildlife that we could. My love for birds, I'm sure, started in Venezuela. The building that we were going to take apart, really my dad was going to take apart, was an auditorium on this mining complex. And so Dad started to remove the wood siding with crowbar and hammer. I picked up the valuable nails and put them in a tin can and filled many tin cans that day. Those nails would be straightened later and used to build the church. Dad's motto was, spend as little as possible. You have no idea how deeply my father was affected by the Great Depression. One time on one of his birthdays, he got a stick of gum, and he had to share that with 4 brothers. Anyway, the wood was stacked, and it was going to be picked up in about a week. Late that afternoon, Dad was walking around in the auditorium, and he found some prime wood on the 2nd floor. So he went up, I stayed downstairs on the cement floor, and he started to pull nails and get these pieces of wood, and he'd throw the nails down, and I'd race across the floor and pick them up and get them in the tin can. And that was how we spent that whole day. It was almost sundown, and Dad decided it was time to leave. The cans of nails were loaded in the car. Dad started the car, turned it around, and started to pull out of the gravel parking lot. We were no more than 50 feet away from the auditorium when we heard the beginning of a terrible noise. It swelled into a loud and long roar, and as we looked around, we could see what was happening. That huge auditorium was crumbling to the ground like a pile of matchsticks. Dad told me later that he was very shaken because not more than 5 minutes before, he was on the 2nd floor and his oldest son was on the cement floor below. You see, my father had lost a son not more than 6 years before, and unfortunately he was going to lose another in another 5 or 6 years. And I unfortunately know how he felt that day. I'm not sure what Dad said on the trip home, but I know that one of his favorite verses that Dan has already even alluded to, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. I know that God was looking after us that afternoon in the jungles of Venezuela, miles and miles and miles away from any other human being. I know that he protected us, and I'm pretty sure that part of the reason why he protected us that day was that I still had lessons to learn from my father, and God had lots of work for him to do still. I challenge each one of us that the minutes that we spend to look forward to the next minute that we will see Dad, because they are precious.
Deep in that story is really the spirituality, the deep spiritual walk that Gerald had with God. I think I became really aware of that the year that we also went out to Idaho. There were 6 of us that year. There was Evelyn and Justin and the 2 boys and myself. We were going to go out and spend a wonderful few weeks together, but it was the year that all of the fires broke out in Idaho. And we'd only been up at the cabin maybe a day or a day and a half, and we got word on the radio that there was a recommendation that everyone evacuate the area because, I mean, every night you could smell the smoke and you could see in the clouds in the evening, you know, where the fires were, and it was advised that everyone leave. Well, within another day of that, it was mandatory that all the women and the children leave, and so Evelyn and Justin left, and that left Gerald and the three of us boys. Men are different than women. I know I'm probably not saying anything you don't know, especially those of you that have been married for a few years. When you face something in life that is, draws you to the very edge, it's almost as though you've come alive in a way you've never experienced. I don't think I've ever had a group of morning worships that were so significant. We'd get up very early in the morning, we'd make breakfast, we would have a worship together, and we faced the real possibility of getting trapped in this canyon with this forest fire. We actually would sit around and we would talk. What will we do if we get trapped? How will we preserve ourselves? Will we live? Will we lose the oxygen? There was something about, and Gerald, each day led us in those worships. Remember that, Danny and Dale? It was alive like I've never been. Gerald had a depth of spirituality that only going through the valley of the shadow of death could really experience. And he was kind of this great father that just hit us all on the head and said, hang in there, boys, here's what we're going to do. The fires were raging. We all had our different jobs. We had a lot of properties to protect, and over the next week we engineered this incredible water system that came down from the mountains, and everything was gravity fed, and all of us had different tasks. And I found really truly that Dad Williams' two boys were as different as night and day. Denny was the hard worker, the organizer. He got everything all lined up, and man, we followed his and Dad's rules and their direction. Dale was given the job of acquisition agent. Are you surprised at that? We would send him, here we are, we're doing all this work. We'd send Dale down on the scooter to acquire for us various firefighting equipment, pumps and all kinds of things. And I kept wondering, man, Dale was constantly bringing back all of this stuff. We'd spent a whole week, we protected that piece of property in the most incredible way. And the last day before we left, I'll never forget, the helicopters came flying in. Man, I felt like I was in Vietnam or something. And the helicopters came in and the forestry guys got out. They looked around at the property and they looked at Gerald and they said, this is the best fire protection I've ever seen on any property in the mountain area. And we looked at each other and we smiled and we patted Dad and ourselves on the back. And Gerald could marshal. When he had a plan, he could, and you know what? You believed in it. You joined in what he had to do. I'm sure you guys in the basketball team know that. The guy had this incredible ability to paint a picture, and you just had to join in. Jordan is one of his grandsons and has something he would like to share as well.
Through the eyes of a grandchild. What I loved about Grandpa the most is how much he loved me and my family. He would do anything and everything he could to give his family the best life. He wanted all of his grandkids to have the best education they could get. He wanted all of us to succeed. He always told us what he believed. He would always tell us to do our best in school, walk beside our family, and always live a life for God. He told me with those three things, I could do anything I put my mind to, and that I would be a successful man in life. He told me to be there for my family and friends like he was, and I promised him I would be. Grandpa had his ups and downs the past couple of years with his health, but no matter what or how he was feeling, my grandpa would be at every possible basketball game and practice. He never missed out on seeing me. When my dad couldn't come to a practice and